So Michael, thank you so much for agreeing to take part in our Great Mind series. We're absolutely delighted to have you participate.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm honoured to be taking part.
What an amazing setting we have here.
Well, absolutely. This is our Darwin Centre, the last big building project we did. It's our Life Sciences Centre. We're very proud of it from an architectural, iconic architectural point of view, and for what it does for the museum.
I'd like to start off by perhaps you providing us with an overview of the Natural History Museum and a bit about the role it plays in our national culture, please.
Sure. Well, of course, we're very old. We go right back to the foundation of the original British Museum, and even beyond that, actually, in that the British Museum was set up based on the collections of Sir Hans Sloane, the great physician and collector, who collected our cultural artifacts and natural history objects, amongst other things, curios, all sorts of things. When he died in, what year would it be, 1756, he allowed his collection, which was enormous, to be bought by the nation. And many people think he donated it to the nation, but in fact the first national lottery was set up to purchase his collection, and in fact that became the British Museum effectively in Bloomsbury. And in fact we were part of the British Museum legally until 1963, although as many people will know, we were physically separated from the British Museum when the natural history collections were moved here, South Kensington, in 1881 with the establishment of the Waterhouse Building. The Waterhouse Building was the brainchild of the first, he's known as the first director. I don't think he was ever called director of the museum. He was the superintendent of the natural history collections of the British Museum, Sir Richard Owen, the famous anatomist. And it was his vision, really, that built this place, or upon which this place was founded.
Well, it sounds like there's a real rich history to the museum. The next question really is regarding some of the challenges. What are the key challenges facing the museums and the cultural sector at the moment, and how do you envisage the Natural History Museum responding to some of these challenges?
Well, I guess like many partly publicly funded organisations, one of our challenges at the moment is what's the future of government funding going to look like?
Sure.
Over the past 5 years, we've seen our government funding fall in real terms by just about a quarter, 25%. And that, of course, has raised some challenges. But I think cultural organisations in this country, particularly those that are sponsored by government, have become very resilient over the last, actually not just the last 5 years, but the last 2 decades. We've diversified our income streams very successfully. And we now have what I would call a three-legged stool. Government subsidy is really important, and these great national institutions that hold national collections really aren't viable without significant government subsidy. But also, our own entrepreneurial ability, our ability to generate our own income has become incredibly important. I'm very pleased to say here that we've maintained very high growth rates in our own commercial income, such that our reliance on government funding has become less over the years.
I think something around 5 million visitors every year, right?
Yeah, I'm very proud to say that in the nearly 11 years that I've been here, we've gone from 3 to almost 5.5 million visitors a year, which is phenomenal growth, far more than, dare I say it, most other museums across the UK have been able to achieve.
The next question is around technology. I think it's fair to say that technology has totally changed the way in which visitors interact with exhibitions. Can you perhaps give us an example of where modern technology is used within the Natural History Museum, please?
Yes, well, I'd like to really reflect on the fact that your question talks about visitor-facing use of technology, but for us, technology that enables us to do better science, to do science faster, more efficiently, and to use the very latest techniques to discover even more about some of our oldest collection items is equally important. So we have fabulous analytical equipment in our basement here. Just as an example, we use a technique called micro CT scanning. So you might be familiar with CAT scanning in a medical sense, where you can look inside somebody's body and look at their internal organs, their internal structure. We do the same here with our objects, but with a CAT scanner that is immensely more powerful. We can look inside rock and look at the fossils, look at the ores and minerals inside rock. We can look inside objects that may be very old or very valuable. We look inside mummified materials. So rather than unwrap a mummy, we can actually use CAT scanning
Wow.
to look inside. On our website, you can find pictures of CAT scans of an anglerfish. We have a very rare and unusual anglerfish in our collection. It's in our spirit collection, so it's stored in alcohol. We don't want to cut it open to see what's inside it, so we put it inside this CAT scanner. Anglerfish have this amazing technique to swallow things that are much bigger than they are. So it has a hugely distended stomach. And we've been able, our scientists have been able through CAT scanning to look at the skeleton of the fish inside it, determine what that species is. That tells us a little bit about the behavioural ecology of anglerfish. And we even think we've been able to see the stomach contents of the fish that the anglerfish itself ate.
Wow.
Now we couldn't have done that
The
15 years ago, and that's a very old specimen, and we've been able to do that in a non-destructive way, so hugely powerful. But to go back to your question about how we interact with visitors, technology has become incredibly important there too. First of all, it enables us to present an awful lot more information to our visitors. So in the days when we used printed labels to describe items in cabinets or displays, you were clearly limited by the physical space of what you can present. Nowadays we use touch screens, so you can layer the information. You can give a great deal of different information, so people can explore what interpretation we provide about objects based on their own interest. Are they interested in the scientific data that we have about this object? Are they interested in something about its cultural history or its economic significance or its political significance? So they can plot their own journey. I think the other exciting thing about technology is 5 years ago we were worrying about what technology to invest in to put in our galleries. But nowadays, of course, everybody carries a smartphone. So our current thoughts are, we should Wi-Fi enable the entire museum.
Yeah.
We have. And instead of putting technology into the galleries, fixed technologies, we should rely on people to bring their own smartphones so that they can interpret data. So we're building apps, and we're creating enormous data sets that people can download and plot their own journey around the museum, customize their experience.
It sounds like there's so much technology taking place within the museum. The next question is around higher education. What role does higher education providers play in terms of providing future talent for the organisation?
Well, I think an important thing to realise when we talk about higher education is that although the museum's not a higher education institution, it participates very actively in higher education. So at any one time, we've got about 120 postgraduate students based here.
Okay.
We teach master's courses with Imperial College and University College London, and we have nearly 100 PhD students based here because they're using our collections for their research. So our scientists will be co-supervisors of those PhD students,
Right.
with a supervisor in the higher education institution that will ultimately award the degree. So we're a very intrinsic part of higher education from that point of view. Many of our scientists will migrate backwards and forwards between the museum and the higher education sector. So many of our scientists have worked in the university sector. Our Director of Science here, his most recent role before he came to the museum was, for example, was Head of Life Sciences at Imperial College just up the road. So first of all, that's really important to us. I think to go to the direct point of your question, which I think is what's of most interest to your students, like most organisations, we're very diverse in the things that we do, and we need people with different skill sets. Yes, we are a natural history museum. We need people who are based in the subject matter, and we have experts in the earth and life sciences and many other things as well. But we do need those basic business skills. We need to run commercial operations. Sure. We need to be effective fundraisers. We need to run, an enterprise of 1,000 people. Yeah. So we are, if you like, a small to medium-sized enterprise, and we need the business skills to run an organisation like that really well. So having access to the right people with the right sort of training really important to us.
I think that's something really important that you've touched on. Many business graduates don't actually consider the cultural heritage sector, and in fact there is actually a lot of wealth of opportunities here, perhaps something that they can match with their passions. The next question is regarding leadership. We teach again leadership within many of our master's programs. So Michael, what kind of leader are you, and what do you look for in people who work for you?
I think the first thing I would say about leadership is you've got to develop a high degree of self-awareness. And I think knowing your own strengths and weaknesses, knowing your own tendencies, how you work in a team, your own personality traits, how you respond in certain situations is incredibly important. So self-awareness, I believe, is very important. I do believe that the best leaders are extremely good communicators. You know, if you can't explain what you're trying to do to people, if you can't explain, you know, the big idea, the big vision of the organisation, then you've got, you know, you've got a big hurdle to overcome. So I think that's very important. I like to be accessible. I mean, there's a cliche about my door is always open. I wouldn't say that, but what I would say is I would always try and give the people who I'm directly responsible for the time to help them achieve their own objectives. And I would do that before I do my own work. And that's just a personal thing, that I am there to facilitate other people achieving what they are setting out to achieve. And I can manage my own time to achieve what I need to achieve. Delegation skills, really important. In my early career, I would say I was not a good delegator. And I realized over a period of time that delegation is the biggest empowerer of people. And people generally don't delegate very well. They'll say, oh yes, I've delegated this. I've told somebody, you know, what I want them to do, how I want them to do it, and what the outcome should be. You know, so that's not a learning experience for the person. And in fact, it may not even end up with the right result because you're kind of prejudging the outcome. So I believe if you're going to delegate somebody, tell people what the task is and let them solve it their own way. And you may learn a lot about the person. You may learn a lot about that particular problem as a result of that. So I guess those are my watchwords. What do I look for in other people? I would say the danger is that you, and this is an innate problem I think with all of us, is that we tend to accumulate around us people who are generally quite like ourselves. Yeah. You know, there's always a danger when you're recruiting. You recruit clones. not literally, but people who are like you, because you have an affinity for people who respond to situations the way that you do. I do believe in leadership. Leadership is about building really good teams. Sure. And building really good teams requires people to have different skill sets, different approaches.
The diversity, yeah.
I'm a very analytical person, a very logical person. So I tend to, first of all, want to in evaluating a situation to work out what do I know, what evidence have I got, where are the degrees of uncertainty. Other people will come from a problem in a completely different viewpoint and be thinking about what does it feel like to people to be in this situation. You've got to have a balance of these techniques. You've got to have a balance. So although 25 years ago I was probably quite skeptical of things like psychometric testing, I believe that these things really do have a value to help you build the right structure of team, make sure you've got the right balance of skills in a team, and you can address problems from a variety of points of view.
Great. My final question is, if you can give any advice to any of our students and graduates who are thinking about entering this sector, what would this be?
This is an incredibly rewarding sector to join. I mean, I think it is built for people who have a passion for the subject areas. So we do a regular employment engagement survey here. The job satisfaction figures here and people's belief and care about the organisation, you know, the figures are almost off the scale. You know, people are passionate about this place and what it stands for. So if you have a passion to work in a particular area and a cultural institution, in this case a natural history museum is your passion, it can be incredibly rewarding. Now that doesn't mean you have to be a tree hugger or you have to be or that you are not grounded in reality. You know, we need people with a variety of skills. We need people who've got good business training. You know, I always say about our commercial activities, you know, 20 years ago, people would say, you know, in a museum, oh, we run a very good retail operation. Well, we run a very good retail operation by the standards of retail operations in museums. That's not good enough from my perspective. When we run a retail operation, I want it to be competitive with the best retailers. And that's the sort of challenge that we should be setting ourselves. So that's why we need the best people. You know, we need great people with the right sort of training, because we set our bar very high. And my belief is that we should set that bar very high, and we can set that bar very high.
So Michael, on behalf of everyone at the London School of Business and Finance and Global University Systems, thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.